Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today at Denver Startup Week, second to last day. Hope everybody's been having a great week, running around to different sessions and struggling with downtown parking, like the rest of us. Anyways, you are here for designing and prioritizing for diverse user groups. If you are in the wrong place, we won't be offended if you leave right now. My name is Christina Linz. This is Laura Pozzi. We will introduce ourselves a little bit more in a second, but first, we're going to talk about the Denver Startup Week sponsors. So this is the designer track. We are sponsored by the Public Works and Batteries 621. I'm supposed to say all of these things about, agreeing to the code of conduct and stuff like that. Please don't yell at us. We're already nervous enough. Thank you. And yeah, if you want to tag hashtag Denver Startup Week, that'd be great. Cool. So I'm Christina Linz. I'm a product designer for Crafted Solutions. We're based here in Denver. We'll give you a little bit more info about what we do in a second. I have lived in Colorado almost all of my life. I've been in Denver for 6 years. I went to school out east at George Washington. I've done a lot of freelancing and worked for different startups in Denver, most recently at Pivotal Cloud Foundry, and then joined Crafted 3 years ago. And I'll let Laura take it away.
Perfect. Hey, everyone. I'm Laura Pozzi. I am a senior product manager with Crafted, also the product practice lead. I'm originally from Philadelphia, moved out here about 4 years ago. I don't know why we have our colleges on here, but I always love to promote the Spiders. So go Spiders if anyone's familiar with the University of Richmond. That just cut out. And I started in product about, 7 or 8 years ago at this point. And I was the mobile lead at a company called Lily Pulitzer, where we kind of started a mobile iOS app kind of in the iOS app boom, and learned all my product management practices from a similar consultancy to Crafted. So when I joined Crafted, it all kind of came full circle. So you've heard Crafted. We can do a little introduction on that. We are a balanced team consultancy based here in Denver. We focus on obviously product delivery, but also agile development enablement. So if you're looking to kind of level up your skills, Crafted is a great place to come. We obviously love to inspire teams, deliver products, and measure outcomes. So we just have a quick video kind of explaining who we are and what we do.
Crafted is a balanced team consultancy that focuses on product development and delivery.
We really pride ourselves on the efficiencies that come with a lot of the best practices that we've really honed.
We go in and help clients build their software more efficiently. We like to try to help them have fun while they're doing it.
Crafted is a consultancy that works with clients to deliver the right product, and we do that by leveraging balanced teams to really marry the best aspects of engineering, design, and product management.
The product manager is all about the needs of the business, the product designer is all about the needs of the user, and then the engineering side is all about the technical feasibility. And so meshing those three perspectives together really are important to a great product.
At center is where that balanced team comes together and is the most efficient, effective form of the teams.
2 heads are better than one, and with us, 3 heads are better than one.
We think if you bring those 3 disciplines together in tight-knit, collaborative units, they can validate, design, and ship a lot of valuable software for our users.
Balanced teams bring the most efficiencies to building software. So with just one discipline, sure, you can get it done, but is it really going to be the ultimate software that's easy to use, provides the right value for the organization and to the users themselves?
A lot of our clients and a lot of other SaaS companies, they have design, they have product management, they have engineering. But those teams and those people interact differently. And they're often in silos, they often hand work off kind of over a fence to each other. Where we bring those teams together 40 hours a week, they are the team delivering software versus different disciplines. So that's one big differentiator for how we build our teams and bring those teams together. The other one is, again, in that enablement model.
We'll oftentimes think about it as a spectrum between delivery and enablement. So with enablement, we will be working side by side with, as an engineer, I'll be working with some of their developers. We'll be pair programming, and we'll be teaching them some techniques.
We pair with the companies that we work with and the specific roles to help enable and teach them on the best practices so that not only are we delivering, but once we roll off, the teams are enabled to continue that momentum.
The enablement piece is really important to us. We think that we're all better together.
Crafted very much believes in building this stuff with you because our clients are the domain expert and we want their input all along the way. We also then, by pairing with our clients, you get that differentiator of enablement where we're teaching you how to do our tactics and our processes while we're building you software. We don't do coaching in a conference room or at a whiteboard. We do our coaching by actually building and shipping software with our clients.
If you would like to get in touch with Crafted and work together with a balanced team to help deliver your product, go to our website and we'll be in touch.
All right, we survived the commercial break, so welcome back. All right, so we're just going to start, see where the audience is at. So how many people have been to a website that you felt didn't actually meet your needs? You went and, yeah, probably most of us. What about a website where you couldn't actually accomplish what you wanted to? Couple hands here. And then finally, how many of you guys have been to a website or an application that just you didn't feel like it was designed for you at all? Most of us. Cool. Awesome. And that's probably because we're kind of in the invisible user group. We strongly believe in user-centered design, and user-centered design is creating products with the real users in mind. But that can mean a lot of different things. Which user? When is the user interacting with your website or your application? And so we use a tool called personas. Who's familiar with personas? Is anyone not familiar with personas? Cool, awesome. So a persona is a profile that is built off of assumptions of your user, and then backed ultimately by research and data that as you kind of validate your assumptions, you're building out this profile of a representation of your user base. These are helpful for a variety of different ways. You guys just heard about the balanced team. Personas help the entire team build empathy with their users as we're building the product. Obviously, you heard in the video that the product designers are the voice of the user, so they need to be super entwined with who the user is, what their needs are, what their motivations are, what they're trying to achieve, and then all of the disciplines can keep that in mind as we're building the product. I'm sure many of you who are familiar with personas have seen something that looks like this. This is from an old project of ours, but we were able to identify this Tiffany persona. Age 34, we talked about her occupation, her family, her home life, and then built out her needs, goals, interests, pain points. Again, to kind of help us, as in our research, to understand who our user is and why we are building the product that we're building. But, of course, with everything, there is a downside to personas. And personas are the general user group, right? So they're built on blanket assumptions, generalized through the research and really aggregated, right? It's kind of the center of the curve, but it doesn't actually acknowledge the nuance of the individual. And so while we're getting kind of the stereotype, there are definitely individual needs, et cetera, that we need to take into account as we're building the product. So it gets us about 80% of the way there. There's probably that 20% that we still need to at least acknowledge or account for.
Thanks, Laura. So yeah, that was the typical approach to personas, which a lot of us have followed for many, many years. In our work at Crafted, we've been with a lot of different clients, and we've come to find that generalized persona, like Laura was saying, isn't nuanced enough to really understand and make great product decisions. So obviously, we want we want to do our research, we want to understand our users, but we've come to find that in a lot of cases, there's actually a better approach, and we're going to talk about a couple of those. So first, let's define diverse user groups. I don't know if anybody was wondering what that meant when they read the title of this session, but there's a couple different ways that this could look. So it could be the same person who's coming to your website at different times with different mindsets. It could be the same a person with two people with the same demographics but different goals. It could be multiple people with conflicting needs and goals. So that could be amongst your users, but that could also be your users and your business goals are sometimes in conflict. It could be people with different demographics but the same goals, and it could be people with overlapping needs and goals. So we're going to go through some different case studies, kind of break those down a little bit more. And then obviously, we're using the word diverse. Like Laura said, a lot of times we're designing for the 80%, and we think that there's a lot of, edge cases, oftentimes around accessibility, and inclusivity is a big, kind of buzzword these days, but, we don't want to just kind of touch on that just to say that we did it. We want to actually design in an inclusive, thoughtful kind of way. So the first one we're going to talk about, a better approach, is called the user spectrum. So this is a spectrum that shows the range of human emotions and behaviors across a group of people. So one of the examples we have here is Tim and Kate are both interested in buying bikes online. So your typical persona might be bike buyer or buyer in an e-com setting, right? However, Tim is new to bikes. He's new here, and Kate is an expert. But the rest of their demographics could be the same. So say they're the same age range, they're from the same location. So those kinds of typical, factors that we use in a persona aren't actually going to help us here, right? They're not going to help us differentiate the experiences for these two people. So when Tim comes to the website to buy a bike, he's actually overwhelmed by too much information. He just doesn't need all that information. He needs to maybe surface level compare a couple bikes, pick a color, and move on with his life. Or onto the trail, we should say. Kate wants an extensive amount of information because she's an expert. She's been through a few bikes. She knows what she likes. She wants all of the details. And honestly, both of them are going to leave your website and you're going to lose a sale if we don't meet both of those needs. But as you can see, they're on two different ends of a spectrum, right? So the better way to do this persona would be to break it down into a non-enthusiast and enthusiast. And you could use whatever kind of terms you want here. But basically the point is just to show that we have two different needs. Even if their demographics are the same, they're trying to do the same thing in two different ways on your website. So how could that look in real life? Okay, so what you see on this first slide, or this first image, is for the non-enthusiast. So everyone is familiar with an e-com site. You come, you see, a product image. You've got some choices to make. You have a buy button. You have a little bit of a description. This is perfect for Tim. This is all the information that Tim really needs. But Kate's like, this is not enough information. So without having to overwhelm Tim with all of the details and putting that in his face right away, how do we get Kate the information that she needs? So one of the ways you can do that is hiding all of these details, maybe under a more information button, for example. Instead of just having an endlessly scrolling page with a million details and the buy button at the bottom, and you're going to lose Tim by the time he gets down there. He's just not going to make it down there. The best way to handle this is kind of hide a little bit of that information, but not exclude it. So if you were to generalize your persona, you might say, okay, these people are bike buyers. They want to know the price, and they want a picture, and they need a buy button, and you're going to miss Kate. If you give them all of the information and you overwhelm them, you're going to miss Tim. So here's a way to get both of them. So the next example of a different way to approach personas is called behavioral archetypes. So these are people grouped by goals and behaviors rather than demographic traits. So this example is a SaaS example. It's easy to design for a very specific persona in SaaS oftentimes, but we've found that there can be nuance in a user on kind of a closed portal as well. So the example we have here is Bill and Mary both work for Clint, and they use an online portal to manage their work. Let's just say their demographics are unknown. Clint may know them, but the builder of the website, us, we don't know. And to be honest, it doesn't necessarily matter, right? So Bill and Mary do some of the same things, and they do some different things for Clint. So how are we going to handle that in our product, right? Clint needs to control for the things that Bill and Mary are able to see so that they're doing the right things in the right place at the right time. So one of the ways that we can do that is using roles and permissions. So this is another kind of sub-layer to a typical persona that's not going to be nuanced enough for us to help us understand what kind of roles we need to build out in our platform. So what we've done here is we've created 3 roles. One is an admin role. That's for Clint. He gets to do everything. He's the boss man. And the second role is for Bill. He gets to do the features A and B. And then the third role is for Mary. She also has to do B, but she does C as well and not A. So this is a perfect way of kind of breaking down, your typical persona may be worker, right? And you would just lump all of these roles together and actually not understand, not meet Clint's needs of being able to kind of control what people are doing in the platform. So the last example of a different way to approach personas is called the paradox of specificity. So this kind of breaks a typical design convention that we do, where we often try to address the 80% and then we just call the 20% our edge cases. We're just kind of like not going to worry about them. Sorry, not sorry, that kind of thing. But there's actually a lot of research that goes into the paradox of specificity. I did not make this up, though I kind of wish that I had. This is a design for a specific set of users, and if you do that, you'll actually cover the needs of a broader audience. So the example here we have is actually a physical product for this one. This is a true story. The OXO peeler was made by a man for his wife who has arthritis. So she has a hard time gripping those tiny little metal peelers. Maybe some of you have an OXO peeler or other kind of kitchen tool in your house. So you are actually benefiting from this man trying to design for the 20% and actually covering the 80% that actually find this to be a better experience as well. So, sorry. So this is kind of flipping it on its head. So you design for the 20% and you actually reach the 80%. Because honestly, all of us, even arthritis or not, don't want to hold on to like slippery, wet metal handles and end up cutting ourselves or whatever. So thank you to that man. I actually should have put his name on here. Okay, so we have an e-comics example of this, of the paradox of specificity. So this is based on a client that Crafted has recently worked with. The general persona is, let's just call her Betty the buyer. She could be, or it could be, Bob the buyer. Not gender specific, not really tied to the demographics, though originally the site was kind of designed for a specific demographic, but they found that honestly, this person could be tech savvy or not tech savvy, they could be any age, they really just come into the site and they want to buy something, right? Like any of us do, and we got to that site and they didn't help us buy what we wanted to buy. So the assumptions that were made were that they had these large CTAs on mobile and that they were going to be too big for most users. So they thought they kind of designed themselves in this corner. They didn't really like the visuals of it. They thought, okay, well, we can probably increase conversions if we do a nicer design for this. So as you can see here, we have a few examples of some things that we tested. And surprise, surprise, everybody actually liked the big buttons. This is a perfect example also of how we use research to kind of validate our assumptions. We really thought we were right on that one. Turns out we were wrong. And this particular test, these 3 tests, was a qualitative test run with AB software. And then, we get the results and they're surprising. So what we go do is we talk to people. So that got us the what. Now we need to know why. And it turns out that actually the conversion rate in some of those cases was worse, which is exactly the wrong thing to do for your client. But tailoring the buttons for this kind of smaller use case actually worked for everyone else. So another example of the paradox of specificity. It's called a paradox for a reason. Okay, so last few examples. I don't have any visuals for these, but I think people can kind of get the idea, right? So for devices, obviously, there's a lot of talk around mobile first, being very mobile friendly, everyone's on their phone. However, we have found that in a lot of cases, certain tasks are just better for desktop, right? So you may have data entry out in the field, that's great on your phone, plugging away on your what's the word? Calculator or whatever, really easy to do with a thumb. What's not easy to do with a thumb on a tiny screen is look at an Excel file and try to like analyze your data, right? So this is an example, and Laura will talk a little bit more as a PM, our expert prioritization person, about how to prioritize. But this is an example of where you would prioritize one feature for mobile and one feature for desktop and kind of do the least amount of harm across those two things. And then the last one, inclusivity and accommodation. So obviously, just baseline, we need to be accommodating for users who cannot use the internet, the same as all able-bodied people. This example shows kind of the breakdown, actually, of how those people could fit in to more of a spectrum. So some users have accommodation needs all of the time, and some have accommodation needs just some of the time. So an example of that is blindness, right? People who use screen readers may be permanently blind at birth. There may be people, and that may be a small section of the population, but then there may be people who are temporarily blind, right? So they're recovering from eye surgery or whatever have you. Their cat scratched their eye. That's unfortunate. And then you have situational blindness where, okay, the sun is glaring on your device, you can't see it, but you still need to use the internet in all of these cases. So how are we designing inclusively to cover all cases, not just considering that maybe small, what we consider edge case of people who may have a permanent disability. Okay, so challenges that we face in doing this approach. So obviously, just lumping everybody into one bucket may be easier, but it doesn't get us better products. The challenge to doing a nuanced approach is going to be, the more volume you have on your platform, the harder it is to design for your spectrums. The less data you have, the harder it's going to be to understand your spectrums. You're just kind of relying on those assumptions. Not investing enough time in understanding your user is going to make it hard for you to kind of get into that nuance and dig a layer deeper from your typical persona. And then, the last two are kind of related. Fighting perfectionism, trying to be everything for everybody rarely works. But also, like, digging into that complexity, can get you into analysis paralysis. So I encourage you not to be afraid of it. Just kind of push back when you see yourself spiraling. Pull out, call your balance team for a little gut check on some of these things. And then I'm going to pass it over to Laura on some specific ways to do that.
Awesome. So yes, if we wanted to take you guys through some tactics, some quick little things that you can actually take from this talk and implement, today. Everything that we do is within the balance team strategy. So from the design, so you have this product or this problem that you're trying to solve, and you want to try and figure out who the users are and how to prioritize which ones to design for. So if it's an existing product, the design team can actually go through and audit the site, and they can determine which users your site has been prioritizing already. So like who has it originally been designed for, and what are the gaps that exist, and what, kind of build a roadmap in terms of that way. They can also experiment with like A/B testing or other tactics like that, with designing for the 20% and test with the 80%. Christina went through the buttons example that was, what was that? The paradox of specificity. So, those buttons were actually intended for the 20%, but actually, the majority had a better experience. So designing those types of experiments can be really beneficial to actually capturing your entire audience. From the product standpoint, we can use analytics to see, what type of devices are being used, we can get basic information on the users as well, as long as you have those tools set up. Tools such as like Google Analytics are great for that. And that actually, starts to bring in actual real data to validate those assumptions, and you can start to prioritize things based on those tools. And then clearly outline the priorities based on the user needs and advocate with stakeholders. A lot of times, a lot of the ADA stuff gets prioritized deep in the backlog, but that also opens people up to lawsuits as well as just a bad user experience. So understanding what the opportunities are there and how you can kind of scatter them in throughout your backlog is also really important. Kind of working with the balance team there. And then finally, engineering. There's actually some great development tools that address accessibility needs Christina talked to the screen readers, but they can also help identify quicker ways to get to that goal or output. Overall, we're all trying to, this is kind of aggressive, but minimize the harm for all users, right? Like we want everybody to come to our products and have a great user experience and be able to achieve the goals that they're trying to achieve. And, obviously that helps them and helps us. So a win-win all around.
We hope you never come to a product that Crafted has designed and raise your hand. This does not meet my needs. This was not designed for me. Okay, and then a toolkit. I don't need to probably go through all of these since we're all product people. If anybody has any specific questions about some of the actual tools that we used to kind of do this process, we can talk through some of those. This is kind of outlining a few qualitative, quantitative, prioritization techniques, testing techniques, and that kind of thing. So, all done. Any questions? I'm gonna let you take that. I'll take the first one because I remember it. How do you know what the 80 and 20% is? I think I hope this doesn't sound like a cop out, but it's a bit of like a gut thing, right? Like when you're talking through your user and you're saying, okay, if we go back to the example of Tim and Kate, right? And we're like, we just have buyers, right? Like now that we know, okay, actually there's probably a spectrum of buyers here, and we have people, and maybe it's not just the enthusiasts, right? Like it could be first-time visitors and return visitors. There's a lot of examples of a spectrum that's based on behavior, not just your demographics. Like one of our tactics where you can look at your existing product and kind of put yourself in the mindset of, okay, who are we actually like addressing here? So if we have just pages and pages of information, we may be addressing the person that needs more information, right? And where are the gaps in that other person? So now I know, like, I kind of have this gut sense, just like looking at it, that we're addressing this 80% versus this 20%. I think the piece of how do you know if actually 80% of your users are this person versus this person just comes down to the research. So some of those tools like surveys, there's tools you can put on your site where you, like the Google Analytics and things like that. You can start to understand, like, are 80% of our users mobile users or desktop users? There are some, and this is why we focus this a lot more on behaviors versus, because you can do click tracking and things like that versus a demographic. A lot of, especially B2C, you're not going to know how old these people are that are coming to your site. It's like it's hard to get that information, right? And then there's the tricky part of like, okay, so this is who we're targeting now, but is this who we want to be targeting? Like, who do we want to be our 80% of users? I've worked at companies in the past where, their demos are much younger, but they're really trying to break in and get, some older people onto their platform and things like that. So that was a lot of roundabouts, but I hope that kind of answered the question. Especially when you're looking at existing product, it's a lot easier to kind of go, okay, if I put myself in this person's mindset, am I addressing this other person's needs?
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I mean, we believe wholeheartedly in user-centered design. So, we're incorporating the user in every step of the process, right? So whether it's an existing product or a greenfield product, upfront we're conducting generative interviews to really, we have an idea. Like I said, you kind of start with assumptions as to who your user is or who you want to be targeting that product market fit. But then, we conduct generative interviews to really start to understand who those people are, understand their motivations, their needs. We start to aggregate that data, and you start to see patterns, right? And that those patterns kind of guide you to that 80% user, and really kind of either confirm or deny the assumptions that you started with. And then as you're building the product, as you're kind of delivering iterations, we like to get it also in front of the user in those small slices. So doing usability testing really starts to, again, confirm or deny whether or not your assumptions or the product that you're building is actually achieving your goals and your needs. And so that, as you're kind of doing that, if you're incorporating the user in that way throughout your entire process, rather than just relying on business assumptions or your own personal biased assumptions, you're able to get a lot closer to the target. I forget the second half. I may have addressed that. What was the second half of the question? Yeah, I think that's it. Ultimately, depends on the goals that you're trying to achieve, right? So if your KPIs are, you know, dollars based, and you want the people that are going to buy the most and buy the most frequently, that might be, you might be focusing on the enthusiast, right? The person that is going to come, you want them to research, you want them to be a consistent customer of your platform, right? They're going to be, they're a mountain biker, they're going to need a helmet, and I don't know, do you have to replace helmets? Like, whatever. So, or if you are more, about the education of mountain biking, maybe you're targeting the non-enthusiasts. You really want to save the parks, right? And so there's more education about that, less e-commerce. Those are really extreme examples, but I think that comes down to the product market fit, really comes down to the business goals and what you're trying to achieve there.
And I'm going to do another plug for usability testing because we didn't talk about it that much here. But we do this a lot. And like Laura was saying, that's really going to help you. You put this in front of the person you thought was your 80%, and that's going to give you some very specific whys as to what's working. Because the problem with personas, as we outlined in the beginning, is that we've really just like made this a lot of individuals into just one kind of person, and really that one person is not showing up to your site, right? Each individual person is showing up to your site. And so when you get one-on-one with people, really kind of helps you understand, what they're thinking through each step of the flow. And if you're looking for product market fit, the best, fastest way to do it, just throw a prototype together, put it in front of 10 people, some that you think might be your 80%, some you think might be your 20%, and see what happens, right? And I am by no means a marketing expert, but I think that, kind of fits in there as well, as like, who are we targeting? Who are we kind of aiming for?
Yeah. I have a couple kind of like broad stroke questions. And one leads into, I guess, so first question is, what if you have no data? And then secondly, if we've heard tons of things about product delivery, and you guys are the first ones that really talk about education and different things. And what would be your different approach to persona if you were looking for engagement and people to really invest in it, like almost journaling, and doing things beyond just clicking buttons, right? And buying things. They're actually needing to engage and connect with people within it. How does that, even if you had data, how does that change your persona at that point?
Yeah, so for the first one, if you have no data, this happens a lot. I think a lot of times when people say they have no data, they mean they don't have a bunch of data filling up a Google Analytics because maybe they don't have a live product yet, they don't have real users on there. But like I was just mentioning, just getting a prototype and putting that in front of people, that is data, right? Like just finding some people on the street, like there's a lot of, we didn't list specific sites, but usertesting.com, like there's a lot of really cheap tools online that can help you recruit very specific, I hate to say the word demographics, but for example, if you're looking for a specific demographic, or if you're like, I'm targeting people in the healthcare industry, like it will help you kind of filter out those people. Oftentimes, like not just our friends, maybe not the right person to test this product, and you can give them a $10 gift card to Starbucks. So there are lots of tools out there that will help you, and that is good data.
Those type of sites these days, like, I personally, like, surveys lose a lot of credibility for me just in the sense of how I fill out, how I engage with surveys. But those sites that you mentioned, those are specific, like, online assistant type sites that are doing this as a job type thing.
Yep.
And truly engaging to try to give feedback.
Yeah, and these people are paid, so they have an incentive to not lie to you. But what we found really valuable is one-on-one. But you can put up something that you can do. So say you don't have a live site yet, you have an idea for a site. or an app or whatever your product is, you say we don't have any data because we don't have anybody coming through this yet. You can take maybe some of your competitors. You can test those things, right? Like what's somebody that's out there doing something similar that you think, I think I have a better idea for this. We've put paper sketches, like my ugly pencil drawings in front of people before. And so there's a lot of really low barrier to entry ways to start getting some info. And I think that kind of starts to answer your second question, which I don't remember entirely. But one of the ways is to see how people are using something that's similar now and think through like, okay, what are the ways that we've thought that we could make this different? Can I even just sketch that on a piece of paper and throw that in front of some people?
Can you throw your the original kind of persona thing up? So one thing I think I use the term proto-persona, but that's a great way to start if you don't have any data at all, right? A proto-persona is entirely based on assumptions. There's no data or validation or research that has gone into it, but it is essentially like who you are envisioning your persona to be. So if you imagine that, so it's basically this kind of template, but with all assumptions, and then you can use that as kind of your gut check as you start to get data points and build the research and that. So part of building a proto-persona is understanding the needs and goals of the user. So if you're building what was your example of journaling?
Like journaling, yeah. And
Yeah.
too, like it would take someone to really think about it and input
Sure. So
thoughts as opposed to
yeah, so let's use like what's that journal that like 5 minutes a day or something. Let's use that as the example, right? So if I'm trying to understand the needs and the goals of those users, right? I'm assuming that those people who are doing the 5 minute a day journaling based on just things I've heard out in the world are, they're trying to center themselves and they're trying to de-stress. These are goals, right? These are things that from just general thoughts in the world that I've heard, I kind of can assume. Then there's their motivations, right? It's needs, goals, motivations, and behaviors. Yeah. So you kind of go through that exercise and kind of generate through yourself or others if you have a team what those behaviors, needs, and goals, motivations are. There's plenty of information, if you just Google proto-personas. And then that's your guide, right? That's what you're trying to either validate that is correct or not. And you can do that. Journaling is a great example because every single person in this room could or could not be a journaler, right? So you could go around and just talk to them, right? Just ask Adam right behind you, like, do you journal? Why do you journal? What's the, yeah. And really, come at it with a really inquisitive, curious mindset. Because that's, if we all just stop to listen, you're going to start to get a lot of data points. And once you get one person, you can then go to, Charlotte next to it and understand. And she's either going to validate or not the proto-persona that you kind of set forth. The important part is to then update your proto-persona with those data points so that you then start to understand that 80%. So there are a lot of really creative ways that you can get data without setting up an analytics platform. If you're looking to do an e-commerce site, go to the mall, talk to the people who are buying, right? Like, so there's a lot of interesting ways to get data points.
Yeah, and maybe I should have prefaced this. So it can be really quite hard to just start right in from, I don't really know what I'm building and get to a user spectrum like this, like a nuanced user spectrum. That's why we said, personas can be very helpful. We were just outlining kind of the problems with being at that like too broad of a level, but like Laura's saying, this is an incredible starting point. And then as you dig more, as you get more data, as you start to get a product out there, as you're getting quantitative data coming in, then you start to go, okay, so, Tiffany's tech savvy, but like we actually have some people on the other end of the spectrum that aren't tech savvy. Like what kind of solutions can we build for them as well? And honestly, and this is actually a good example. You can open a big market for those people on the other end of the spectrum actually. Yeah, that's the hard part, right? TJ and I have bang our heads against the wall many hours trying to figure out how to meet everyone's needs. But like I said, it's easy to get into that perfectionism, trying to do everything for everybody. And I think the bike website is a good example of trying to find those creative ways to have both, like, kind of have your cake and eat it too, but without, like I said, without hurting anyone. So like, it's hard without another specific example. Do you have another one?
Yeah, so I can speak to it generally rather than an example, but I would just say, so you're at a stalemate, right? So pick a lane, go, take one very small step towards one lane or the other. Try and do another test and see, incrementally if you're gonna get, you know, better results. If you do it in small, cheaper slices, you're not going to be wasting that much time, that much money, and you can quickly pivot the other way, right? Or adapt to go the other way. So I would say, like, again, use experimentation if you're kind of at a stalemate, but I wouldn't let it hinder you from kind of moving forward.
Thanks, Laura. That got my gears going on something else. Another tool that we use is called a 2x2. So as far as like prioritization goes, it sounds like you just need a little prioritization activity. The definition of the word priority was never meant to be plural, right? So you only have one thing at the top, and you pick the thing you think is going to be the most successful. Probably not the thing that's the hardest, maybe not even the thing that's the easiest, maybe somewhere in between based on your goals. That's where like kind of a more specific example could be helpful. But you just, yeah, like Laura said, you kind of take a small step towards that. And, I mean, we've gotten pretty far down the road and had to turn around sometimes. That does happen. If this was easy, everyone would do it. But yeah, I think kind of getting into the prioritization activities can help a lot with that as well.
Yeah, it's okay to be wrong. As long as you're not doing it in a very expensive and time-consuming way, it's definitely okay to be wrong.
And to your point about getting far down the road and turning around, or you don't get that far, at what point do you guys know, like, you know what, this isn't right, this isn't good? What do you guys use as a barometer?
Yeah, I can speak to it from a user perspective. If I've put something in front of 10 people and they all hate it or can't use it for one reason or the other, I know I've gone too far down that road. And this is why we test with prototypes in Figma, or like why we test with designs prior to getting to engineering, because I would hate to go tap a dev on a shoulder and say, can you actually just undo all of that code you just wrote, because I was wrong. But yeah, like Laura was saying, there's nothing wrong in being wrong. I think Laura, maybe you can speak to it from a business perspective as far as getting down the road and needing to turn
Yeah,
around.
I think especially, as you're building the product, I think it starts to become really obvious, especially if you have really strong KPIs and metrics. You either see people doing the actions you want or you don't. And so that it can either surface itself in usability testing or, A/B testing. It becomes very clear if they're doing one action or not, or just like general KPIs. So, kind of having your finger on the pulse of a lot of those things, especially from the product perspective, helps kind of guide you towards that North Star of whether it's right or wrong. So, yeah. Awesome. Well, oh yeah, go ahead. No worries.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do have to start somewhere, right? And if we're starting from scratch on a product, you have to get it out there for somebody, and and like we've been saying, you take your kind of small steps and go from there. A lot of times we're just afraid to get started, like staring at a blank piece of paper or saying, I have buyers. Like, how do I get from buyers to like a user spectrum, right? And so, I think it's taking all of those baby steps to kind of get there, knowing that you don't kind of jump out there right away and have a user spectrum. A lot of the clients that Crafted works with has established products, and so this is making me realize how much easier our lives are with existing data and things like that to kind of go off of. And a lot of times they just went with that first assumption, these are our users, and when we come in, actually, we are able to give them a little bit of that, okay, like we know you know a lot about your user, but maybe let's go, talk to some new people and see what might have changed, or like what's changed in the market, what's changed with these people, what kind of gaps are we seeing, and so you do have to start with a chunk first to even understand like kind of where you might be on a spectrum, or if there are specific demos, or if it's like actually there's a broad range of demos, that kind of thing. Does that help answer it? Yeah, like I was saying, I mean, you kind of go with your gut, right? And like, I mean, think about Uber or think about Airbnb or crowd surfing. Like all these ideas were like crazy at first, right? Like who's gonna like drive around in a stranger's car or like sleep in a stranger's house or whatever, right? But they kind of like stuck with it. I'm sure there's points along the way where they had an idea of their original user. That's definitely morphed over time, right? Now they have their edge cases or their ends of the spectrum are a lot different than when they started. But they also kind of had the guts to just kind of keep going when people were like, this may be the wrong thing to be trying to do. So there's an element of that as well. Yeah, the only constant is change, right? So. No, and we didn't talk about that too much, but there are definitely products where you have totally different personas, right? And those people are trying to, they're totally different demos. They're trying to accomplish totally different things. One of the examples actually like Clint and his workers, like they're using the same tool, but they may be doing like actually a lot different things there. One is a boss and one is the people working for him, right? So that might be a case for different personas. I would say if you see like shades of this person or you see overlapping behaviors or whatever, that's where you get more into this nuance where you have sub-personas or, they're not entirely different roles, right? But yeah, there are for sure cases where you have personas that are doing very different things, and you have to accommodate both of those.
Yeah, I would say it's very rare that there's only one persona for a product. So even this bike example that Christina was going through, right, the enthusiast for non-enthusiasts, there's multiple ways to get to the buy now button. It's just accommodating both of those personas and balancing those in the right way. Think about our phones, right? We can get to email 18 different ways, and it's just how what group you kind of fall into. So I would say it's very rare that there's just one persona.
And you usually have the person like building the thing, right? So you now have a business owner as a persona, whereas like the business owner's main goal is like to make as much money as possible. The buyer's main goal may be to spend the least amount of money as possible, right? So you have two totally different personas doing different things. One is selling the thing, one's buying the thing, and those are contradictory. But we've still designed a site where they're both kind of meeting their needs.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for coming. We'll be up here if you have any other questions. And I think there's a LinkedIn if you want to connect with us. Happy to keep the conversation going beyond today as well. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody.